Are the Canadian Hells Angels working with the Russian government? Is an LA hip-hop mogul and philanthropist really a violent gang leader? All of this and much more on this week's episode of Organized Crime News Weekly. Welcome back to Organized Crime News Weekly. This is the weekly show where we discuss the goings-on in the global criminal underworld. My name is Kiva Dottie. Before I start, just want to remind everyone to please like, share, and subscribe to help us grow this podcast. Our first story concerns a man named Emanuele Gregorini, who is also known by the name of Dollarino. He is an Italian man, and he was arrested in Cartagena, Colombia this past week. He had been on the run from Italian authorities since 2023, and he was the subject of an Interpol Red Notice. He was initially arrested in 2020 in Italy, and in Italy he is wanted for drug trafficking, mafia association, threats, extortion, and arms trafficking. Gregorini is linked to the Moccia Camorra clan of Afragola, and he is a key figure in the Lombard Mafia system, which is an alliance between Cosa Nostra, Camorra, and 'Ndrangheta, and those are the three most powerful mafia groupings in all of Italy. And Gregorini is alleged to be responsible for shipments of cocaine coming from Colombia, Panama, and Brazil. And these shipments of cocaine would leave ports such as Cartagena, Barranquilla, and Santa Marta before heading to Europe. He was caught after being surveilled by Colombian authorities before he was arrested in his luxurious apartment. And Gregorini's arrest is another example of how European drug traffickers have formed closer ties with South American drug producers. Just last year, there was another Italian man by the name of Luigi Belvedere who was associated with the Camorra grouping, and he was also arrested in Colombia. So this seems to be a growing trend of European groupings trying to establish themselves in South America and forge closer ties with these organizations. But I think it's also interesting that Gregorini is a member of the Lombard Mafia, and that there's an alliance between the Cosa Nostra, Camorra, and 'Ndrangheta. Historically, some of these groups have been at odds with each other, but it goes to show that in organized crime, it's better to make money rather than make headlines and start wars with each other. And the Lombard Mafia obviously gets its name from the Lombardy region of Italy, which is a northern region of Italy. Typically, the mafia groupings operate in the southern part of Italy. But in this case, they have come together to exploit the criminal opportunities up in the north. But very interesting development, and something to look out for is the proliferation of more Italian mafiosi in places in South America, as well as consolidation of criminal operations between historic rivals in Italy. Our next story concerns Ecuadorian investigative journalist Andres Duran, who has fled Ecuador after receiving death threats from allegations he has made. The reason I'm talking about him on this podcast is because he has made allegations about Ecuadorian President Daniel Noboa and that his family is linked to cocaine trafficking. Duran has uncovered allegations of the Noboa family's trading company, Noboa Trading SA, being responsible for shipments of cocaine from Ecuador to Italy between 2020 and 2024. Back in 2023, a shipment of 600 kilos of cocaine was confiscated in Turkey, and this shipment was being camouflaged in banana boxes from the Bonita Bananas Company, and the Bonita Bananas Company is owned by Noboa's father, Alvaro. Alvaro is a prominent businessman in Ecuador who is controversial for his use of child labor on his banana plantations and his strong opposition to trade unions. He is also alleged in the past to have operated multiple shell companies, which he has used to evade taxes. In addition to these cocaine trafficking allegations, Duran has also made corruption allegations regarding the family's oil company, Petronoboa. But this is shocking because Ecuador last year declared a state of emergency and declared war on all the gangs and drug trafficking organizations. And Noboa, being the president, is obviously the spearhead of this campaign. It's unknown how true these allegations are yet, but it does raise some concern that Duran has been forced to flee Ecuador because someone obviously did not like the way he was reporting on the president. But this should be a developing story, and we will stay tuned to see what happens. Our next story concerns Eugene Henley, also known as Big U, who is a self-described community activist, hip-hop industry mogul, and he's the owner of the record label Unique Music. The reason I'm talking about him, he has been arrested and charged along with 18 other individuals for operating a racketeering enterprise, extortion, human trafficking, and murder. As well as being a big deal in the hip-hop world, Henley also happens to be a leader of the Rollin' 60s Crips street gang. And obviously the Crips, very legendary Los Angeles street gang, have a historic rivalry with the Bloods. Needs no further explanation. In addition, he ran his own group called the Big U Enterprise, which sometimes partnered in criminal endeavors with the Rolling 60s, it's alleged. The murder Henley is accused of is the January 2021 murder of an aspiring rapper signed to Unique Music, who at this moment has only been identified as RW. RW and Henley reportedly had a disagreement over an agreed-upon rate for a recording, and RW then subsequently recorded a defamatory song about Henley, and obviously this pissed Henley off. Henley and another man then confronted RW in Las Vegas. Henley then reportedly drove RW to North Las Vegas, where he is said to have then shot him in the head, leaving his body in a ditch off the side of Interstate 15 in the desert. Henley then allegedly ordered workers at his studio back in Los Angeles to remove surveillance footage from the studio and to not speak to law enforcement. In addition to this murder, Henley is also accused of submitting a fraudulent COVID-19 relief application, as well as defrauding donors to a nonprofit charity he ran called Developing Options. And this charity was funded by the city of Los Angeles' mayor's office through the Gang Reduction Youth Development Program, which is pretty ironic. And he's said to have embezzled money from this charity into his personal bank account, with much of it said to have been donated by prominent celebrities such as NBA players, as well as award-winning companies. Henley has denied these allegations in videos released since being charged. He is currently in custody and is scheduled to be arraigned on April 8th, and he faces a maximum sentence of life in prison if convicted. Pretty crazy story. Obviously, a lot of people in the rap industry have ties to these street gangs, but this is one very high-profile example of that, and it just goes to show that sometimes gangsters cannot give up their way of life, even as they try to portray themselves as legitimate businessmen. Sometimes they cannot leave the streets behind. Our next story concerns Canadian Martin Robert. He is alleged to be the #1 member of the Hells Angels in the province of Quebec in Canada, and he is currently under investigation by the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which is Canada's version of the FBI. And the reason they are interested in him is for multiple trips he made to Russia between 2022 and 2024. Obviously, the Russian-Ukrainian war has led to Russia becoming a social pariah in the international community. So obviously, a well-known criminal such as Martin Robert going to Russia will attract attention. And the RCMP is investigating if he met with Alexander Zoldostanov. Alexander Zoldostanov is the leader of the Grey Wolves Motorcycle Club in Russia. They are an ultranationalist biker club that has very close ties to Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin. And there are rumors floating around that Robert is engaging in black market oil deals with Russia. Obviously, the Russian-Ukrainian war has led to Russia being heavily sanctioned and with fewer options to make money off of their vast oil resources. The Russians have turned to outside parties, many of them being criminals, to sell their oil on the black market. These allegations have not been proven yet. But another peculiar thing is that Robert has been photographed recently with a tattoo of the Kremlin on his chest with the word Moscow under it. So it doesn't help his case that he seems to be a big fan of Russia. And let's dig a little bit into Robert's past. He has been the subject of a warning notice by Canadian authorities for several years now, who have been closely monitoring his trips abroad. He's gone overseas to places such as Dubai to meet with other Hells Angels there. Most notably, Australian Hells Angels president Angelo Pandelli. He's also been reported to have made numerous trips to South America, particularly Colombia, and this is said to be to coordinate cocaine shipments back to Canada. And Robert is one of the few Canadian Hells Angels with the international or world status, which means he is able to operate on the global scale with Hells Angels chapters all over the world. The Hells Angels are present on every continent in more than 50 countries. Robert was a member of the Death Riders Motorcycle Club before he became a full patch member of the Hells Angels back in 2002. He was a combatant in the Quebec Biker War that lasted from 1994 to 2002. It was a war between the Hells Angels and the rival Rock Machine Motorcycle Club for control of the drug trade in Montreal. This war led to over 160 murders. But Robert was arrested in Mexico in 2010 for crimes committed during the Quebec Biker War. At that time, he had been declared one of the 10 most wanted criminals in Quebec. In 2015, he was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder for the role he played in carrying out assassinations during the war, but he was released immediately as he had been locked up for 5 years already awaiting trial and was sentenced to time served. Back in 2017, he became a member of the Côte d'Azur chapter in France, further expanding his international contacts. And it is thought that his contacts within this chapter facilitated further contacts with Russians. But in Robert's home province of Quebec, there is also a war brewing between the Hells Angels there and street gangs, particularly the Blood Family Mafia. The Hells Angels are the most powerful and dominant organized crime faction in Canada at the moment, and Quebec is the epicenter of their power in Canada. And since the end of the Quebec Biker War in 2002, the Hells Angels have imposed a 10% tax on all drug sales in the region. And for the past 2 years, the street gangs have been rebelling against the Hells Angels, and this has led to a war that has seen firebombings, murders of 14-year-old boys, an accidental murder of a French tourist and her daughter, and it is still ongoing as of March 2025. But Robert obviously has a huge interest in this conflict, as he is the leader of the Quebec Hells Angels. So obviously he's got his plate full with these and the allegations that he may in fact be a collaborator with the Kremlin. Our final story concerns a gang war that has erupted in the past couple weeks, and this is in Edinburgh, Scotland. And this war is said to have started over a cocaine deal gone wrong. And this war so far has led to many firebombings and shootings across Edinburgh, but surprisingly no fatalities as of yet. This war is allegedly being fought to take control of turf controlled by drug kingpin Mark Richardson. And it's alleged this turf war allegedly started when just a few weeks ago, men working for Richardson ripped off a drug dealer with powerful connections, and this deal is said to have gone down in where else but Dubai. Richardson is currently incarcerated and serving a 9-year prison sentence after being convicted of illegally possessing a handgun back in 2018. Before that, he worked for the Gillespie brothers, who at one time were the most powerful cocaine traffickers in Scotland. They disappeared in Brazil in 2019, and they are presumed to have been murdered by Brazilian drug traffickers, but it remains unknown what their fate is. But since then, Richardson is said to have taken over their organization. And since the beginning of this war in the past couple of weeks, Richardson has been moved to another prison from the one he was in due to threats against his life, and he currently remains in protective custody. The man who is said to be leading the offensive against Richardson's operations is an up-and-coming kingpin named Stevie Jameson, who is currently operating out of Dubai. Jameson is a close friend of powerful cocaine trafficker Jamie Stevenson, better known as the Iceman, and the Iceman is currently locked up after being sentenced last year to 16 years for cocaine charges. Jameson is said to have taken over the remnants of Stevenson's organization, and both Jameson and Stevenson are allied with the Lyons crime family of Glasgow. The Lyons crime family are a notable family of criminals in Glasgow that for the last almost 25 years have been the dominant player in the Scotland drug trade. And they have been fighting a war with the rival Daniel family. And the Lyons are currently led by Stephen Lyons, who is currently based out of, you guessed it, Dubai. And the Lyons, in turn, are allied with the Kinahan cartel, one of the most powerful cocaine trafficking organizations in the world. They are responsible for up to a third of cocaine being imported into Europe. They are also currently run out of Dubai by Daniel Kinahan. Daniel Kinahan is said to be close to the leader of the Lyons family, Stephen Lyons. So it is thought that the Kinahans are supporting this war from a distance, and it is said that the war is for the Lyons family to take over the Edinburgh drug market. They've always been primarily based out of Glasgow, and it looks like they're looking to expand. They've also suffered great financial losses lately with arrests and robberies of some of their drug stashes. And with powerful allies like the Kinahans, it looks like there is no stopping them. And Mark Richardson, in turn, is allied with the Daniel family, the arch rivals of the Lyons family. So it almost seems like a continuation of the decades-long feud between the Lyons and the Daniel families. And some of the events that have occurred in the past couple weeks due to this war: a beauty salon run by Richardson's partner was firebombed. A warehouse belonging to Richardson's partner's father was also firebombed. A friend of Richardson had his home firebombed, and gunshots have been fired into the home of a close friend of Richardson, as well as there's been many firebombings of cars belonging to people associated with Richardson. And a lot of these events have been recorded and posted on social media, and messages threatening Richardson have even been shared on social media and messaging apps. But Richardson obviously is in a very weakened position. He is in an isolated wing of a prison, so he has very little control over what goes on the streets. And Stevie Jameson and the Lyons family have the upper hand. And as of yet, Richardson has yet to retaliate against the actions committed against himself, his family, and his associates. Clearly, Stevie Jameson and the Lyons family have the advantage. The backing of the Irish Kinahan cartel almost all but guarantees that they will swallow up Richardson's drug turf, and the Daniel family has been greatly weakened in recent years. So Richardson right now is in a very bad spot, and he has very little people to turn to as he goes up against the juggernaut that is the Kinahan cartel and their allies, the Lyons family. Okay, that's going to do it for this week's edition of Organized Crime News Weekly. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will be back next week with more awesome stories concerning the global criminal underworld. Thank you so much for tuning in.